Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You know, old-timers in boxing have a saying: a good big man beats a good little man. But this is 2017, and let's add a YouTube modification given the current state of boxing. Right? These days you have to change the statement. I believe the more proper statement is: a good big man beats a good little man, except when a catch weight is involved. I believe that this fight between Saul Alvarez and the bigger Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is an absolute mismatch. Absolute mismatch. Unlike many, I'm expecting a stoppage, certainly a one-sided beating after the third round. I like Saul Alvarez in this fight. I like him big. I believe the devil is in the details. The devil is in the catch weight of 164.5 pounds. In my opinion, once they agreed to that catch weight, Chavez Jr. lost the fight. His only chance is early in the fight, before his stamina completely evaporates, which is what happens to weight-drained fighters, right? Before he gets overwhelmed by a younger lion who's one of the hardest punchers in boxing pound for pound. Chavez Jr. has perhaps a 2 to 3 round window in which to run out of his corner and try to catch Saul Alvarez while he's cold. That's his only chance. And you need to ask yourself, how did that work out for James Kirkland? Let's just go through it. Just look at the personalities. Just look at the weight history. Now understand, Julio Cesar Chavez lost to Sergio Martinez in a big fight at middleweight, right? At the time, he was a middleweight, at least on the day of the fight. Now, there were rumors going around that Chavez Jr. would have to lose between 15 and 20 pounds just to make weight. There were rumors going around that Chavez Jr. wasn't the most dedicated fighter in sparring, right, in training camp. So, curiously enough, and keep in mind, this was a guy who was unbeaten before the Sergio Martinez fight. Right? Curiously enough, after he loses that fight, Freddie Roach, Google this, in a series of interviews, talked about how he hardly saw Chavez Jr. during training camp. And the two guys split. Now, what trainer walks away from one of the cash cows of the sport? Make no mistake, both Canelo and Chavez Jr. are cash cows. They're box office magnets. What superstar trainer walks away from one of the cash cows of the sport? But yet that's what Freddie Roach did. Right? If you're a gambler, that's a red flag. Right? You can overcome a lot of things, but a lack of dedication and preparation for the biggest fight of your career, to me, connotes other problems. Well, the other problems surfaced soon after that, because Chavez Jr. signed, this is years ago, folks, Chavez Jr. signed to fight Brian Vera in his next fight. Right? Now, interestingly enough, they hid the ball on this one. They wouldn't tell you what weight the fight was going to be fought at. Why? Because the rumor was that Chavez Jr. was having a problem even making 168 pounds. So the weight kept fluctuating, right? It was a wait and see type of thing. Because Chavez Jr. was the box office draw in the equation, right? The world waited to see where he weighed before they actually announced the weight on the fight. So you knew in 2013 that Chavez Jr. was having a problem making weight. Then he went out, and in my opinion, right, I thought he lost the first Brian Vera fight. I thought that was an outrage. I thought the scoring was absolutely ridiculous. Well, whatever you think about that first Brian Vera fight, can we agree that Chavez Jr. got embarrassed in the Andres Fonfara fight? Embarrassed to the point where he quits on his stool, not really due to some injury. It's not like blood's gushing in his eye or anything like that, right? No, it's embarrassment. The injury was to his psyche, right? Look at the scorecards in that fight. They're wide. Understand, too, both guys weighed 171.5 pounds for that fight. Well north of the 164.5 that Chavez Jr. is going to have to deplete his body to make against Canelo. Right? Did you know that 2 fights ago, this is post-Fonfara, 2 fights ago, Chavez Jr. came in at a 170-pound catch weight. Catch weight, 170. Again, that's 5.5 pounds north of where he's going to fight Canelo. 5.5 pounds. Right? This is a guy who, quite frankly, is too big to be fighting at 164.5 pounds. The devil's in the details. Let's just say, too, that since he fell off the mountain, since he lost his unbeaten status, he hasn't been the same fighter. Right? Some guys, as long as they're successful, can hold it together. But when they lose that designation, when they lose that recognition, when they're no longer the unbeaten champion, when they're, the guy with the loss who's trying to climb back up the mountain, it starts to fall apart. Now let's talk about a different personality type, right? The other side of the street, so to speak. Saul Alvarez lost to Floyd Mayweather. Lost badly in my book. I understand the scoring is a little bit curious. You can look at the scorecards yourself. But he lost badly in that fight. So badly that during the fight, Dan Rayfield of ESPN had Mayweather throwing a shutout after 6 rounds. Right? 6-0. Right? I was looking at the fight. It was astonishing just to see the gap between the two fighters. Physically, just in terms of foot speed, ring presence. Canelo looked slow in that fight. You understood that he wasn't on Floyd's level. Canelo was unbeaten at the time, right? It was a big fall from the mountain for him. But here's how he bounced back. Now think about it. The guy has just suffered a devastating loss. You could imagine the disappointment. The guy then fights Alfredo Angulo. Tough opponent. Bigger opponent than him, quite frankly. Right? Physically bigger. He then fights Erislandy Lara. A guy nobody wants to fight. He then fights James Kirkland. He then fights Miguel Cotto. He then fights Amir Khan. He then fights champion Liam Smith. This is a guy who doesn't take fights off. Right? This is a guy who is a professional. Right? He is a professional prize fighter. He's self-motivated. Right? Self-motivated. Trainers aren't wondering where he is when he's supposed to be sparring and stuff like that. He's not out getting DUIs during training camp. No, this is a guy who is a professional. He has a job to do. He's preparing for the job. He's then going to execute on it. He doesn't take fights off. All of the guys he's fighting are world-class guys. Some of the guys, Amir Khan, had certain advantages on him in terms of hand speed and stuff, and Canelo comes in the ring ready to deal with that. Right? Canelo's a future boxing Hall of Famer. Folks, he's spending his career fighting future boxing Hall of Famers like Mayweather and Cotto. Right? That's who the guy is. Now, I know here online, I've looked at some Canelo fights and, I'll question the decision. I personally thought Erislandy Lara beat him. I'm one of those loons who disagrees with the boxing establishment. I believe Miguel Cotto beat him. But the one thing I never doubt about Canelo, never, ever, right, is the quality of his opposition. This is a guy who wants to be the best. His way of doing so is by fighting tough opponents. Right? Canelo's not going to go missing and have trainers wondering. No, the trainer knows the first guy in the gym is Saul Alvarez. Right? This is the guy who suffers a loss. He shows up early the next day. Right? That loss is a pain in his side he needs to get rid of. He needs to get back at it. He's fallen off the mountain. This is the guy who shows up with climbing gear right away to try to climb back up the mountain. I give Canelo the mental edge. I give Canelo the physical edge. Canelo's a walking contradiction. In public, he's respectful. He's soft-spoken. Right? Has a pretty face. Looks like he's just low-key and easygoing. As I've said, don't let the smooth taste fool you. This guy has been, for years, one of the hardest punchers in the sport of boxing. Right? One of the hardest punchers in the sport, and he's two-handed. It's a left hook that has Carlos Baldomir unconscious while he's standing up next to Canelo. Right? It's a right hand that literally has Amir Khan in a fight I thought Khan was dominating. Go from standing up completely alert to on the canvas unconscious. Right? Canelo hits hard with both hands. Liam Smith, tough guy, front foot heavy, gets taken out with body shots so withering that when the guy's on the canvas, you see him holding his midsection. Right? So, in this fight, I think the punching power edge at 164.5 certainly goes to Saul Alvarez. Right? To me, it's going to be a miracle. A miracle. If Chavez is able to make the 164.5. Don't be surprised, because this is what happens in boxing, if further accommodations aren't made. In other words, Chavez Jr. has such a hard time making the 164.5 that they then announce, you know what? Both fighters agreed to come in at 166. They'll try to sell it to you as a group decision, when it's really the Canelo people who clearly had the whip in their hand when they were negotiating the deal points for this match. It'll be the Canelo people looking at Chavez Jr. and saying, you know what, we can still take him at 166. Right? This guy's not ready for us. Right? Let's get the payday on this guy. We've had him struggling south of 168 to try to make 164.5. But hell, to save the gate, to save the payday, we'll fight him at 166. Right? Maybe the Canelo people will even get additional compensation for the variance. So I'm expecting Chavez Jr., who had very poor form against Fonfara. He's coming in with both of his feet parallel to each other. Right? Didn't have any real defensive construct. Fonfara's just, with precision, cherry-picking him. Right? Chavez Jr. looked like he was trying to rely on athleticism. Right? That has been diminished by yo-yoing weight. I question right now whether Chavez Jr. is still a world-class fighter. I believe the boxing public gets fooled by nostalgia. You hear a name, Chavez Jr., and you remember back when he was fighting John Duddy or Andy Lee years ago. And you think, hey, he must still be world-class. Some of these guys aren't. So forgive me. It's a huge fight. Right? I've spent many a Cinco de Mayo weekend in Las Vegas. It's going to be packed. This is going to be big box office. With all of that said, it's a mismatch. Saul Alvarez, in my opinion, is going to get the stoppage. Because it's really a fight for bragging rights in Mexico. Right? Neither guy is going to want to be completely embarrassed in the ring. Right? In my opinion, since Chavez Jr. has already quit on the stool against Andres Fonfara, if he feels that he's on the verge of getting stopped and embarrassed, I don't believe he goes out on his sword. I think what he's going to do is quit in the corner. In any event, I think a stoppage by Canelo here is a real possibility, right? If the odds allow it. I like Canelo to win. I'll sprinkle some on Canelo by KO. The only chance, in my opinion, that Chavez Jr. has in this fight is a KO within the first 4 rounds. After round 4, to me, Canelo is going to take over. Right? I like Canelo big here. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.